All right, next up, let's keep this rolling. We talked about Latin America. We talked about the opportunity in Europe. Who better to now take the reins than Kyle Detweiler from Clever Leaves? How are you, Kyle?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm
Can you hear
good,
me?
man. I'm good. Yes, I've got you. I will let you jump right in, but you guys, again, Clever Leaves CLVR is the ticker there. And Kyle, I'm sure we'll have some questions for you in a bit here.
Great. Well, as always, thanks for having me, Patrick. Excited to share the story about Clever Leaves. Um, Clever Leaves was built on a very simple idea, and that is that cannabis production facilities, until recently, were not constructed where they made economic or environmental sense. They were just constructed where it was first legal. And there was an opportunity for a significant disruptor like Clever Leaves to come around and figure out that you probably shouldn't grow cannabis in the country of Canada. You should grow it near the equator or in good places in Europe like Portugal, where we can do it that in a way that enables the industry to move forward with a lower cost structure and also make a better impact on Mother Earth. So who is Clever Leaves today? We are a NASDAQ listed business. We are one of the leaders in a low cost pharmaceutical quality cannabis production system with our main operations in Colombia and Portugal. We have just under $80 million of cash on hand in our balance sheet, and with a footprint of 1.9 million square feet of total cultivation, we are also, as a single company, responsible for approximately one half of the country of Colombia's THC production. In the US, when we're talking about brands and kind of cannabis quality, often it results on celebrity endorsements, the location of your retail location, that kind of thing. In pharmaceutical cannabis, i.e. everything outside of North America, Clever Leaves is the only company in the world that has an EU GMP certification, an INVIMA GMP certification, as well as what they call GACP certification for our cultivation facilities. Talked a little bit more about that, but that recognition has also earned us to be named as a project of strategic and national interest by the Colombian government. As I were just talking to an investor prior to this, the concept of regulatory arbitrage is an important one for Clever Leaves. With that large footprint, if it was as easy for us to sell our products as it is for a US MSO or a single state operator, Clever Leaves would be a very, very profitable company. But because legalization has not yet happened, we believe we are very well positioned for legalization. And one of our strategies to further help us spring into the United States was the acquisition of a non-cannabis business in the United States, which we call Herbal Brands. And that will also serve as a good platform for a CBD product launch later this year or early next. So maybe just hopping straight into how I think about the industry. What's different about Clever Leaves than a traditional cannabis company that you might know, whether it's a Canadian LP or a US MSO? Well, the first thing that's different is that we are very focused as a B2B operation. We do not try to compete with our customers. We focus on cultivation and extraction. We also believe that the model of a multinational operator transcends different states. We're not confined to, if we have a license in Florida, all we can sell to is in Florida. With our federally licensed operation, if a new country like Spain or Mexico or Italy comes online, we can simply add on to our existing infrastructure and sell into a completely new geography. And since this operation is fully federally licensed and legal, we are not subject to 280E taxes, and we were able to achieve a NASDAQ listing. So when I think about the future of legalization, as barriers begin to fall in this industry, that can help some players, but it can also hurt other players. And we think Clever Leaves will do much better in a world where products begin to flow across international boundaries, which is now beginning to emerge. So looking at our core platform, as Patrick mentioned, we are one of the leaders in Latin America today. We are the continent's only EU GMP certified cultivator and extractor. But Colombia today only allows us to sell extracts or isolated cannabinoids. So a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, we went into Portugal, acquired 9 million square feet of land, and have built one of Europe's emerging low-cost licensed cannabis producers. So I think we've proven to the world we can grow it, we can extract it, we can get it certified, just like anybody in a very high-cost jurisdiction like Germany or Canada. Now the focus for Cleverleaves is really on distributing that product. So we have a number of exclusive partnerships in Brazil I'll talk about. We have a couple businesses in Germany, including narcotics importation companies, because cannabis is still a controlled substance. It has to pass through a very cottage industry of narcotics importers. And then, of course, I mentioned our U.S. nutraceutical business called Herbal Brands, which sells to over, I think it's now 15,000 retail locations in the United States. So let's start with the basics of why Colombia. If you're looking around a Southern California greenhouse that might be growing cannabis today, and maybe 20 years ago they grew red roses there, the logical question is, where did the roses go? And today, Colombia is one of the leading flower importers to the United States. Colombia is responsible for approximately 70% of all cut flower imports. And cannabis, like red roses, love the equatorial location of Colombia. 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness. That's exactly what cannabis facilities in Canada and the United States try to trick cannabis to feel like. And we like to say that in Colombia, we get all of that for free. So in other industries, I've spent time in the oil and gas industry, manufacturing. Sure, you can extract hydrocarbons from the tar sands of Canada. Sure, you can manufacture in the United States, and there might be some good reasons to do so. But if you want to produce oil cheaply and environmentally friendly, you should do it in Saudi Arabia. If you want to have low-cost manufacturing, a place like China will be advantageous. And in cannabis, compared to some of these centers that are built, in a tundra, we can have over a 9 times cost advantage. So even more significant than some of those other industries. So when you look at the cost per gram, we have cultivated our cannabis at 14 cents a gram compared to the Canadian average of over $2 a square foot. And it's not just lower cost labor, it's everything that Colombia brings. We talked about the year-round cultivation environment. We also cultivate about 8,300 feet of elevation, which if you're a botanist or an agricultural expert, you understand that pest mitigation is a very big challenge in cannabis because you can't use pesticides or traditional fungicides or herbicides. So having that high elevation, helps mitigate a number of the pests. If you also think that we're at the beginning of the cannabis industry as opposed to inning 7 or 8, capital costs are also important. Cleverleaves was very successful in stretching our dollars as far as we possibly could. And for the same capacity or productive capacity that the Canadians built for over $200 a square foot, we at Cleverleaves did it for 14. That means that a dollar invested with Cleverleaves went almost 14 times as far as compared to some of those other geographies in terms of constructing capacity. So here you can see our cultivation and extraction footprint, put up against a lot of other names that you might know: Afria, Curaleaf, Trulieve, Aurora. So we are already one of the largest producers in the world, and it's just a question now about how quickly we will be able to move that product and begin the large scale commercialization. When it comes to certifications, we are also one of the only companies in the world which has an EU GMP certification for the production of cannabis. Now, a lot of people say that's a fancy acronym. What does it mean? Well, the important thing in Europe is that cannabis isn't treated like a nutraceutical in the US or Canada. It's treated like a true pharmaceutical product. That means that our products must sit side by side, Lipitor or Humira on the shelf of a pharmacy, and therefore, just because you're in cannabis, you don't get a free pass for having sort of an ineffective or a low quality production chain. You have to produce to the same standards, and that's what EU GMP is all about. As a result of that, it also translates into higher pricing. We could see prices of GMP certified products maybe 2 to 10 times as high as what we might find for a non-certified product. So that differentiation, not even in Canada were there a number of companies that achieved it this far, and as the only Colombian or only Latin American company to do it, it's a pretty remarkable achievement. So here's just a quick visual of our production centers. You're looking at one of the largest contiguous cannabis operations in the world, 1.8 million square feet of canopy. Again, we've been cultivating here for 3 years now, so we've figured it out. We also have an outdoor site. If 1.8 million square feet isn't good enough, we have a 73 million square foot outdoor operation, which would be 5 times larger than all the other Canadian operators put together if we were to activate that project. It's not necessary today, but it was important in striking commercial partnerships so that companies like Cannabis could see that we could scale with them. Here's a quick snapshot of our extraction facility. Again, looks like a pharmaceutical lab, the only one of its kind in Latin America. Quick overview of our U.S. business. We acquired a brand in 2019 that had been around for 30 years. We have a 50-person team that's focused on sort of nutraceutical sales in the United States, and we now reach 15,000 different retail locations with high-quality customers like CVS or GNC, Walgreens, the Vitamin Shop. So as you think about sort of a mass value CBD product, which we'll begin to launch, in the not too distant future, this is the perfect hunting ground for us and perfect platform that we can, attack the U.S. opportunity. Shifting over to Europe, I enjoyed the last presentation talking about the future of Europe, and I do agree. Europe is like being in the United States in the cannabis industry in 2017. That was really an interesting time to get involved, and that's why we have one of the larger operations in Portugal. In the last 6 months, we've seen Afria and Tilray come together. That was one of them. We also saw a company called Curaleaf acquire a business called EMAC, which had a substantial footprint in Portugal. And so, I think the value of the Portuguese operation is becoming, more and more important to Clever Leaves in the industry. So if you're trying to compare, Clever Leaves to other, operators in Latin America, it's pretty easy to slice it. We're one of the larger in terms of square footage. We're the only one that has GMP certification. We have announced our THC quota, which we can talk more about. And again, we have an ability to sell flower products as well as the extracted products from Colombia. So, there have been other companies, some of the big Canadian operators came down as well and were not able to make their projects work in Colombia. So I think it's important to recognize that there is a local skill set that is important to survive down there. And in most of my career at KKR and the Blackstone Group, I spent a lot of time in Latin America investing in agriculture and in healthcare. And so it's been a very helpful set of lessons and networks. So if you're a card counter in the industry, I would like to think that you would come up with a similar strategy to Clever Leaves. The Canada and the US opportunity, of course, are interesting, but in Europe or even a market like Brazil, we can sell to over 1 billion people in those two geographies in a federally legal way. And really the amount of people focused on these markets is not that high, mostly because it is very expensive and time consuming to get set up there. You have to have things like EU GMP certification. And we already talked about how there are only a handful of companies in the world that have it. And so that also translates into higher unit economics. In Germany, cannabis is selling at the retail location, i.e. a pharmacy, for almost $22 a gram. And in Brazil, where you might sort of leap to an assumption that pricing is, very low because the lower purchasing power, the average price per gram in Brazil is still north of $4, which is pretty close to pricing in the United States. And again, very few companies have been able to attack those markets. So let's talk about Germany. Germany is one of the fastest growing sections of the European cannabis market. 70% growth in 2019. It was about 30% growth in 2020, slowed down a little bit by COVID, but we're really just beginning. Only 1 in 1,000 people in Germany have access to medical cannabis at this point. And so we're trying to increase that number. And, this page probably doesn't do it justice, but a couple of months ago, Clever Leaves struck an arrangement with a company called Ethypharm. Ethypharm is one of the first pharmaceutical companies to truly enter cannabis, not through distributing cannabis company brands, but through trying to brand their own products. And so Ethypharm is a private equity-backed company. It's owned by a business called PIA Partners. They have 1,500 employees in Europe. They are really trying to develop a strong cannabis franchise. And Clever Leaves is now their supplier for Germany. So another way to say that is some of the biggest players in European pharma have not entered Germany yet. That's maybe one of the reasons why patient usage is so low. But as Clever Leaves helps enable these companies to come to market, I think we're going to see significant growth. Mentioning Brazil very quickly, Brazil is also a very interesting market that a lot of people talk high level about, but don't get into the specifics. And I would challenge you to find another company in the cannabis industry which has announced the type of supply partnerships in Brazil that we have. We have announced over $15 million worth of take-or-pays in the country. And why is Cleverly so uniquely situated to help expand the Brazilian market? Well, one of the requirements is that the Brazilian market is truly pharmaceutical. The product mix is focused on extracts, so there's no flower. There is no domestic production that is permitted. And because of that pharmaceutical nature, everything must have GMP certification. And so Cleverly is, as checking all of those boxes in addition to having a Latin American cost structure. It's not a surprise that we're one of the B2B suppliers of choice for downstream companies in that geography. So we've announced partnerships with Entourage, Verde Med, Green Care. Historically in Latin America, we have had a partnership with Canopy Growth. We're having partnerships in Israel with a company called Univo, in Australia with a company called Canatrek, and I talked about Ethifarm over in Germany. And so Cleverleaves is a different business, right? We're very different than the traditional cannabis companies in that we are a B2B focused player. Partners pick us because we speed up their access to market. It's taken Cleverleaves 5 years to get to where it is. And now a company like Ethifarm can enter the space without having to spend that time, without having to build the infrastructure, without having to learn how to grow cannabis. And it's a quite valuable piece of the chain. Our leadership is a strong crew. We're also lucky to be joined by former U.S. Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, and throughout the organization, I think we've got some great people. Just a couple months ago, we were joined by our new CFO Hank Hague, who worked at Abacus Health Products before that business was sold to Charlotte's Web. So Patrick, I see it's that time.
You saw my face and ran for the hills. I understand, man. It happens. I've got some interesting questions in the chat, and I have a feeling you'll want to clarify some of this just about the exporting, right? Especially in the Colombian market specifically. There seems to be some questions here about whether you are allowed to export, whether you're not, what share of the exports you guys have. I wonder if there's any clarification you want to provide there.
Sure. We absolutely can export from Colombia. It's a very complicated process. Sort of fun story. Just over my right shoulder, you're looking at a Department of Homeland Security box. That is the first commercial shipment of our CBD brought into the United States. That's what we're dealing with, right? This is going to take some time to iron out these kinks. But as we start to work with customs agents, as we work with different governments around the world, this will become easier and easier. So, expect a steady stream of announcements from Cleverleaves as we begin to get products into different geographies. But we're absolutely allowed to export from Colombia, and that's really the mission of Cleverleaves.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. And for those of you guys in the chat, Cleverleaves is very well positioned in that particular market. And I think that's why Kyle was talking earlier about that's giant, massive, setup they have down there in Colombia, and why it's so and will be so useful in terms of supplying the supply chain overall. So, Kyle, you talked a lot about Brazil, which is newer to the discussion this time around. So that's interesting to me. Is that something that you're prioritizing? Let's say maybe even ahead of what you're doing in Europe? Is Europe still the priority number one for you, or is it the neighboring sort of municipalities in Latin America?
Like any good father, all my children are special. We probably do focus on, 4 key markets: Germany, Israel, Australia, and Brazil. Those aren't the only markets we sell into, but those are probably the biggest. Brazil is a very unique one because of the setup of the market. And so, we believe that Cleverleaves has already developed a very significant market share of the API that goes in. And you also, I can't get through the Brazilian regulation in a single slide. It's much more complicated than that.
Sure.
But Brazil is moving, they're going to evolve from sort of a wellness, like right today you can import, products with a very loose standards directly to a patient. It's very cumbersome, but it can be done. That won't last forever. They're going to move into what they call RDC 327, which is like a true pharmaceutical product that must be registered with the Anvisa, which is their version of the FDA. So this compassionate use market is going to fizzle out, and then you're going to have, a true pharmaceutical ingredient supplier like Cleverleaves, and that's why Green Care, Entourage, and Verde Med have selected Cleverleaves as their partner, because they see it's not really what has been about Brazil's past. It's really about what the future will look like. And the typical U.S. hemp farmer that doesn't have EU GMP certification is not going to be able to supply that product going forward.
Right, right. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, I really appreciate the time today, Kyle. This has been great, man, and it's going to be exciting to watch the next partnerships that you guys unfold, and to see where you're going next. So thanks again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick.
Take care. So again, Kyle Detweiler, CEO of Cleverleaves, CLVR.